I stood frozen in my home office, staring at the man I was supposed to marry in 3 months. Samuel sat across from me, casually leaning back in the chair like he was about to suggest what we should order for dinner. But the words that had just left his mouth were anything but casual. "The wedding is off, unless you put the condo, the car, and your savings in my name." He said it so smoothly, so matter-of-factly, like he was discussing the weather or asking me to pass the salt, not demanding that I hand over everything I'd spent the last decade of my life building, everything I'd sacrificed for, everything I'd earned through brutal 80-hour work weeks and skipped vacations and nights alone in this very office reviewing contracts until my eyes burned. I looked at him sitting there in my office, in my condo, the condo I'd bought 6 years ago without a single cent of his help, the condo I'd paid off 2 years early by living like a broke college student in a beautiful space. And something inside me went completely, utterly cold. "Let me think about it," I said. My voice came out calm, steady, almost detached. What I didn't tell him was that I'd already started planning something he would never see coming. By the time he showed up for his final suit fitting on Monday afternoon, a complete stranger would be wearing his $5,000 Tom Ford jacket, and I'd be sitting in my car across the street, watching the whole thing unfold with a large coffee in my hand and satisfaction warming my chest. But let me back up, because understanding how I ended up in that moment, how I ended up engaged to a man who saw me as an asset to acquire rather than a person to love, requires understanding who I was before Samuel Brennan walked into my life. My name is Lily Morgan. I'm 33 years old, and I work as a corporate real estate attorney here in Denver. That condo Samuel wanted his name on? I bought it when I was 27, with money I'd saved from 3 years of brutal associate work at a law firm that didn't think women belonged in commercial real estate. Every senior partner made that clear through dismissive comments and assignments that went to less qualified male colleagues. The Range Rover he wanted transferred into his name? I paid cash for it when I was 31. $38,000 I'd saved specifically for that purpose because I didn't want debt hanging over my head, didn't want monthly payments, didn't want anyone to have leverage over something I needed to get to work every day. The savings account he wanted access to? That took me a full decade to build. 6 figures that represented every vacation I didn't take, every expensive dinner I skipped, every weekend I worked while my law school friends were out living their lives. Every single dollar in that account had a story behind it. Every dollar represented a choice I'd made to prioritize security over spontaneity. I learned about financial independence from my mother, though not in the way most people learn things from their parents. I learned it by watching what happens when you don't have it, when you trust someone completely and they leave you with nothing. My mother died when I was 25, right before I passed the bar exam. Ovarian cancer that moved fast and showed absolutely no mercy. In those final weeks when she knew she wasn't leaving that hospital, when the doctors had stopped talking about treatment and started talking about comfort, she grabbed my hand one afternoon. Her grip was weak, but her words were strong. "Lily, wealth isn't about what you earn. It's about what you keep and what you protect. Don't ever let anyone make you feel guilty for building something solid. And don't ever, ever give someone else control over what you've built." She was talking about my father, though she never said his name. He'd left when I was 12, just walked out one morning and never came back. When he left, my mother discovered something devastating. She had nothing in her own name. No credit cards, no savings account without his name attached to it, no property she owned independently. At 42 years old, with a 12-year-old daughter, she had to start completely from scratch. She rebuilt herself, got her real estate license, worked 2 jobs for years, eventually became successful. But she never forgot what those early years of dependence felt like, the vulnerability, the powerlessness, the sick feeling of realizing you'd trusted someone with everything and they'd left you with absolutely nothing. So when I bought my condo at 27, I was honoring her memory. The market had dipped just enough to make it possible, but I emptied my entire savings and took on a mortgage that terrified me. My colleagues thought I was being reckless and foolish. Rent for a few more years, they said. Build more cushion. You're overextending yourself. But I could hear my mother's voice in my head, and I knew what I had to do. For the next 4 years, I lived like a broke student in a beautiful space. Cheap furniture from IKEA that I assembled myself at midnight after long days at the office. No vacations beyond weekend hiking trips. Cooking at home every single night. Driving a 12-year-old Honda Civic I'd bought with cash from my first law firm bonus. Raise went straight toward that mortgage principal. Every bonus check, no matter how tempting it was to splurge. Every tax refund. I tracked my progress in a spreadsheet, watching the principal balance drop month by month, year by year. My best friend Rachel watched this entire process with a mixture of admiration and genuine concern. We'd met in law school, bonded over being 2 of only 7 women in our corporate law program. She'd gone into public interest law, made a quarter of what I made, and seemed perfectly happy living with a roommate and 2 cats. You're 30 years old and you haven't left Colorado in 4 years, she said one Sunday during our usual trail run through the foothills. You're missing your life. I'm building my life, I corrected her. There's a difference. When I made that final mortgage payment at 31, I sat alone in my condo and cried. Relief tears, freedom tears. The kind of tears that come when you realize you've actually accomplished something you weren't entirely sure was possible. That condo was mine, completely, totally, legally mine. Every tile, every window, every square foot belonged to me because I'd earned it. Then I bought the Range Rover, used, 3 years old, but I paid the full $38,000 in cash. Rachel thought I was crazy again. Just finance it. Interest rates are low. Keep your cash liquid. But I didn't want payments. I didn't want debt. I wanted to know that if everything fell apart tomorrow, if I lost my job or got sick or something unexpected happened, I had a home and a vehicle that no one could touch. No one could repossess. No one could take away from me. By 32, I had that 6-figure savings account and a partnership track at one of Denver's most prestigious commercial real estate firms. I'd negotiated leases for major office buildings downtown. I knew every zoning regulation in Denver County by heart. Senior partners called me directly for advice. Clients requested me specifically for complex deals. But I was also lonely in a way I didn't admit to anyone, not even Rachel. I'd come home every night to that beautiful empty condo and wonder if I'd made the wrong choices. All my college friends were married or engaged. They posted pictures of vacations with their partners and anniversary celebrations and shared lives. I had property and professional respect and financial security, but I didn't have anyone to share it with. I didn't have someone to come home to, someone who was excited to hear about my day, even the boring parts. That's the state I was in when I met Samuel Brennan 18 months ago at a charity gala for legal aid services. He was 35, charming in an effortless way, working in what he called finance consulting. I later learned that meant he advised startups on funding strategies, though none of his clients ever seemed to actually secure funding. But those first months felt absolutely effortless. He'd show up at my office with coffee during late nights when I was drowning in contract review. He'd listen when I talked about difficult clients. Actually listen, not just wait for his turn to talk. He seemed genuinely impressed by my career, by what I'd built, by the fact that I owned property outright at 33. He made me feel like someone finally saw the work behind the success, like someone understood that my condo and my car and my savings weren't just things I had. They were evidence of choices I'd made, sacrifices I'd accepted, priorities I'd maintained for years. Rachel was skeptical from the very beginning. She'd pull me aside at brunch and lower her voice. There's something performative about him. Watch how he talks about you around other people. It's always about what you have, not who you are. But I was tired of being alone, tired of being the only single attorney at firm events, tired of coming home to silence every night. So I ignored the small warning signs that popped up like little red flags I didn't want to see. The way Samuel always steered conversations toward my assets, how he'd casually mention our place or our car when legally everything was mine, how he never offered to contribute equally to expenses, but always had money for expensive clothes he didn't need and the latest electronics. 10 months into dating, he moved into my condo. His lease was ending, and the conversation felt natural. He started contributing $1,500 a month for utilities and groceries. It seemed fair. I owned the place outright, so he shouldn't have to pay what he'd pay in rent elsewhere. But things shifted within weeks of him moving in. My minimalist aesthetic suddenly became cold and corporate. He started redecorating without asking, bringing home furniture I never wanted, inviting his friends over constantly for poker nights that left beer stains on my carefully maintained coffee table. Then came the comments about my career, how I worked too much, how his buddy's girlfriend was a yoga instructor with better work-life balance, how maybe I should consider estate planning instead of commercial real estate, something less stressful, something that wouldn't require so many late nights. Each comment felt small in isolation, but together they formed a pattern I was too close to see clearly. 8 months ago, I proposed to him. Yes, I got down on one knee at our favorite restaurant and presented a ring that cost 2 months of my salary. He cried, said yes, and immediately started posting photos with captions about being set for life and finding his forever home. Not forever person, forever home. That should have registered as strange. But I was caught up in wedding planning, throwing myself into it with the same intensity I brought to major legal cases. My half of the expenses climbed to $35,000. Venue at the Botanic Gardens, photographer who'd shot weddings for Denver Magazine, caterer everyone raved about, florist, string quartet, the works. Samuel would occasionally mention costs, but never offered to split anything equally. And I told myself it was fine because I earned significantly more. I could afford it. What was the point of having money if I couldn't use it to create something beautiful? Rachel's skepticism intensified as the wedding approached. She'd watch him at dinner parties, notice how he talked about our assets when everything was legally mine, how conversations always circled back to my condo value or my savings rather than my actual achievements. "He's not in love with you," she said one night after too much wine. "He's in love with what you've built." I didn't want to hear it. I was 3 months away from not being alone anymore. 3 months away from having someone to come home to every night. 3 months away from finally having what everyone else seemed to have so easily. And then Samuel sat down in my home office and delivered his ultimatum. Transfer the condo into his name. Transfer the car. Give him access to my savings account. All of it, or the wedding was off. I looked at him across my desk, the desk I'd bought with my first bonus, in the office I'd created in the condo I'd purchased alone. And something crystallized with absolute clarity. He didn't want to build a life with me. He wanted to take possession of the life I'd already built. And he was using our wedding, our relationship, our supposed future together as leverage to make it happen. "Let me think about it," I said, keeping my voice steady and calm. He stood up, confident he'd won. "Don't take too long. We've got vendor deadlines coming up." After he left the room, I sat there for a long time thinking about my mother's words, about what she'd warned me to protect, about the difference between partnership and possession, and I started planning something Samuel Brennan would never see coming. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying Samuel's words over and over. Not just the ultimatum itself, but the way he'd delivered it, the casual tone, like he was asking me to pick up groceries on the way home, the prepared quality of his speech, like he'd rehearsed it multiple times in front of a mirror, the immediate escalation to threats when I didn't agree instantly. This wasn't spontaneous. This was calculated and planned. Sunday morning, I met Rachel for our usual trail run at Washington Park. We'd been doing this same route every Sunday for 5 years, 7 miles that took us around the reservoir twice. Usually, we talked about work, about difficult cases, about nothing particularly important. Today, I unloaded everything before we'd even finished the first mile. Rachel stopped mid-stride, hands on her knees, breathing hard. But it wasn't from exertion. Say that again. He wants what? The condo, the car, access to my savings. All of it transferred into his name or, at minimum, joint ownership, 3 months before the wedding. She straightened up, and her expression shifted into something I'd rarely seen from her. Pure, undiluted anger. Lily, that's not a partnership request. That's a heist with a ceremony attached. He's making it sound reasonable, like I'm being paranoid for hesitating. Of course he is. Rachel grabbed my shoulders, forcing me to look directly at her. My sister went through this exact thing 6 years ago. Her ex wanted his name on her car and condo to prove she trusted him. She did it because she loved him and didn't want him to feel like she was holding back. 2 years later, during the divorce, she had to buy him out of assets he never contributed a single cent toward. He walked away with $80,000 of her equity, while she struggled to refinance everything back into her own name. I felt something cold settling deep in my chest. Rachel, I don't know what to do. You call a lawyer today, not a wedding planner, not a therapist, a lawyer who specializes in asset protection. And you don't tell Samuel you're doing it. We finished the run in silence, but my mind was racing the entire time. By the time I got home, Samuel had left for one of his networking coffee meetings that never seemed to result in actual work or clients. I showered, changed into comfortable clothes, and made a phone call I never thought I'd be making 3 months before my wedding. Monday morning at 9 sharp, I called Jonathan Hastings. He was a family law partner at my firm, 62 years old, with a reputation for being brilliant and brutally honest. We'd worked together on a few cases where real estate intersected with divorce proceedings, and I'd always respected his straightforward perspective. "Lily, this is unexpected," he said, when his assistant put me through. "What can I do for you?" I explained the situation as clinically as possible, keeping emotion out of it, presenting it like a case file. The ultimatum, the timing, the specific assets Samuel wanted access to. The way he'd framed my hesitation as a character flaw, as evidence that I didn't truly love him or trust him. The silence on the other end lasted so long, I thought the call had dropped. "Jonathan? I'm here." His voice had changed, taken on a weariness that made him sound every one of his 62 years. "Lily, I've been practicing family law for 30 years. I've seen this scenario play out more times than I can count, and it never, ever ends well for the person with assets. So what does that mean legally? It means if you transfer these assets before marriage, you're making a gift with zero legal protection. Something happens and you break up, you have no recourse to get them back. After marriage, they become marital property, which means in a divorce they'd be split regardless. Either way, you're massively exposed." I felt my attorney brain kick in, the part of me that could analyze situations without emotion, that could see legal strategy clearly. "What about the timing? Does that matter?" "Timing is the biggest red flag here." Jonathan's voice got firmer, more emphatic. "An ultimatum 3 months before a wedding, after you've already paid deposits and made commitments? That's not love talking, Lily. That's strategy. That's someone who knows exactly what they're doing and is using your emotional investment and financial sunk costs as leverage." The words landed like a physical blow to my chest. What should I do? Tell him you want to consult a financial planner before making any decisions about asset transfer. Watch his reaction very carefully. If he's a legitimate partner who wants what's best for both of you, he'll understand due diligence. If he's not, he'll escalate the pressure and make you feel guilty for being cautious. We talked for another 20 minutes. Jonathan asked detailed questions about Samuel's financial situation, his contributions to household expenses, his work history, his background. With each answer I gave, I could hear the concern growing in Jonathan's voice. "One more thing," he said before we hung up. "Document everything from this point forward. Keep records of conversations, texts, financial contributions. If this goes sideways, and I think it very well might, You'll need proof of what actually happened versus what he might claim happened. I spent the rest of Monday in a dissociative state I recognized from particularly stressful cases. Physically present, going through motions, but emotionally somewhere else entirely. I showed up to meetings, I reviewed contracts, I responded to emails, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying every interaction with Samuel through this new lens Jonathan had provided. How quickly things had changed after he moved in, how my home had stopped feeling like mine, how every conversation about my work had become criticism disguised as concern, how he'd never once suggested we save together for something, buy something jointly, build something new, only that I transfer what I already owned. The pattern was forming, clear and undeniable now that I was actually looking at it. Wednesday night we had dinner at home. I'd picked up Thai food on the way back from the office, and we ate at my kitchen table, the table I'd bought 3 years ago, in the kitchen of the condo I'd owned for 6 years. "I've been thinking about what you said," I started carefully, watching his face, "about the asset transfers. And I want to talk to a financial advisor first. Make sure we're structuring everything properly for tax purposes, for legal protection. These are major financial decisions, and I want to make sure we're doing them right." His face changed immediately. The guardedness shifted to something harder, colder. "You're overthinking this." "I'm being cautious with major assets. That's not overthinking. That's being responsible. People who love each other don't need financial advisors to trust each other." He put down his fork with more force than necessary. "This is exactly what I was worried about. You're treating our marriage like a business transaction." "I'm treating major financial decisions like major financial decisions." He stood up from the table abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. "You know what this tells me? That you don't actually want to marry me. You want a prenup, a financial advisor, probably separate bank accounts too. That's not a marriage, Lily. That's a business arrangement where you keep all the power, and I'm just some accessory to your success." "Samuel, that's not what I'm saying. You're making this complicated because you can't handle the idea of actually sharing your life with someone. You built this fortress of assets and success, and you don't actually want to let anyone in. You want a partner you can control, not an equal." He grabbed his keys and wallet from the counter. "I'm going to stay at Marcus's place for a few days. Maybe you'll figure out what you actually want, because right now it's pretty clear you want a wedding more than a marriage." The door closed behind him. Not quite a slam, but close enough to make his point. I sat at that table for a long time after he left, food getting cold in front of me, mind cycling through everything he'd just said. The way he'd twisted my reasonable request into a character assassination. How he'd made me feel guilty for wanting to protect assets I'd built before he even existed in my life. How quickly he'd escalated from conversation to abandonment. My phone buzzed. A text from Samuel. "Staying at Marcus's tonight. Need space to think about whether we're actually ready for this." Then another message came through. "It hurts that you don't trust me enough to build a real partnership." And another. "I thought you were different. Guess I was wrong." Each message was carefully designed to make me feel guilty, to make me question my own judgment, to make me reach out and apologize for having boundaries. I turned off my phone completely and poured myself a glass of wine. Then I sat in my living room with my furniture in my home, and let myself feel what I'd been avoiding for weeks. This wasn't right. None of this was right. And something was about to happen that would prove just how wrong I'd been about Samuel Brennan. Samuel stayed at Marcus's place for 2 nights. 2 nights of texts designed to make me feel guilty, to make me question my own judgment, to soften me up for when he inevitably came back. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I worked late at the office, took on extra research assignments, stayed busy enough that I didn't have time to second-guess myself. Wednesday evening, I came home exhausted from a brutal commercial lease negotiation. 12 straight hours fighting over liability clauses with a client who thought he could rewrite basic contract law through sheer stubbornness. My feet hurt from pacing conference rooms in heels. My head throbbed from staring at contract language until the words blurred together. All I wanted was a glass of wine, silence, and maybe a hot bath. Instead, I walked into my condo and found Samuel sprawled on my couch with his college roommate, Marcus. Sports blaring on my TV at a volume that made my headache exponentially worse. Empty beer bottles accumulating on my coffee table, leaving water rings on the wood I'd carefully maintained. Samuel didn't even look up when I entered, didn't acknowledge my presence, didn't pause his conversation. Just said, "We're planning bachelor party details. Marcus found a place in Vegas. It's going to be epic." I stood there for a moment, briefcase in hand, professional clothes wrinkled from the long day, waiting for something more. An apology for the fight, an explanation for why he'd let himself back in after storming out. Something. Nothing came. "I'm going to get some wine," I said to no one in particular. I headed toward the kitchen, too tired for confrontation, every muscle in my body aching. The open floor plan I'd loved when I bought this place, the seamless flow between living room and kitchen, the natural light, the way it made the space feel larger, was about to become the design choice that changed everything. Because that's when I heard Marcus's voice, carrying clearly from the living room. "Have you told her about the Vegas budget yet? That's going to be expensive as hell." I froze, just inside the kitchen, hidden from view by the angle of the wall. Wine glass in my hand, completely still, barely breathing. Samuel's laugh came next. Not the laugh he used with me, soft and almost self-deprecating. This was different, darker, more calculating. "Not yet. She'll cover it. She always does." My hand tightened on the wine glass. "Marcus, dude, you've got her trained. My girlfriend would absolutely murder me if I pulled that." "That's because your girlfriend doesn't have a paid-off condo in Cherry Creek and $100,000 in liquid savings." Samuel's voice was casual, conversational, like he was discussing sports scores. "Lily's good for it. She works constantly anyway. Might as well benefit from it." The wine glass felt impossibly heavy in my hand. I set it down on the counter silently, carefully, every movement deliberate. My attorney brain kicked in hard, the part of me that knew evidence when I heard it, that understood the value of listening before reacting. Marcus's voice dropped lower, conspiratorial. "And the asset transfer thing? Bro, that's brilliant. Once your name's on that condo and the car, you've got real security. Even if things go sideways down the line, you walk away with something substantial. That's thinking ahead." "I know." Samuel sounded genuinely pleased with himself. "My dad suggested it, actually." Everything inside me went completely cold. "Your dad told you to do this?" "Yeah, he went through a messy divorce in his 30s, and his ex-wife's name wasn't on anything. He got some alimony, but that was it. He walked away broke, starting from scratch at 40. He told me, never marry someone with assets without protecting yourself first. If she turns out to be difficult or controlling, you're not starting from zero. It's just smart planning." I heard the clink of beer bottles, the sound of them toasting to something that made me want to vomit. Then Samuel added the part that made my blood turn to absolute ice. "Plus, once I have access to her savings account, I can finally launch that cryptocurrency fund I've been planning. She won't even notice if I move $50,000 into the initial investment. By the time we're married and she figures it out, it'll have doubled, hopefully tripled, and I'll be the one with the empire. She'll probably be proud of me for taking initiative." Marcus laughed, loud and genuine. "That's cold, man. But I respect the hustle. And you're right, she works like 80 hours a week. Probably won't even notice the money's gone until you've already made it back. Maybe you'll make enough to pay her back and keep the profits." "That's the plan. She's so busy with her commercial real estate cases, she barely looks at her personal accounts. I've watched her. She checks her balance maybe once a month, tops. By the time she realizes $50,000 is missing, I'll be able to explain it as an investment in our future." I stood in my kitchen, in my condo that I'd bought with my money, listening to my fiancé and his friend plot my financial destruction with the casual ease of people planning a vacation. They kept talking about the Vegas trip, about how expensive bottle service was going to be, about whether they should get a suite or just regular rooms. But I'd stopped listening to the actual words. I was processing what I'd just heard, letting it sink in completely. Samuel hadn't just asked for asset transfers on a whim. His father had coached him, had given him a strategy based on his own divorce experience. This was premeditated, calculated, a plan that had been forming since before Samuel even moved into my condo. And the cryptocurrency scheme? He'd already decided to steal $50,000 from my savings account. Not borrow, not ask permission for, steal. He'd been watching my banking habits, timing his access request for when he could drain my account without immediate detection. The word difficult kept echoing in my head. His father had warned him I might turn out to be difficult or controlling, which apparently meant objecting to financial exploitation, standing up for myself, protecting what I'd built. I forced myself to move, to act natural. I walked back through the living room like I'd heard absolutely nothing. Both of them looked up briefly, then went back to their conversation about Vegas hotels. Samuel gave me a smile that would have seemed warm if I hadn't just heard what I'd heard. "Long day?" he asked, almost concerned. "Brutal," I managed. "I'm going to take a shower." I went to my bedroom in my condo, and closed the door. Sat on the edge of my bed, feeling like someone had just handed me architectural plans for my own destruction. He'd drawn it all out: the asset transfer to secure his position, the savings drain for his cryptocurrency dreams, the entire blueprint of how Samuel Brennan planned to dismantle everything Lily Morgan had built. But he'd made one critical mistake. He'd planned this entire scheme while living in the home of a corporate attorney who'd spent 10 years learning how to protect assets, identify fraud, and document evidence. I walked into my bathroom, turned the shower as hot as it would go, and let the scalding water run over me until my skin turned red. Let it burn away the last remnants of doubt, the final threads of hope that maybe I'd misunderstood. Maybe there was another explanation. There wasn't another explanation. There was only the truth I'd overheard in my own living room. Samuel wasn't building a life with me. He was systematically planning to strip everything I'd worked for, piece by piece, asset by asset. First the property transfer, getting his name on things he'd never contributed to. Then the savings drain, $50,000 stolen for gambling on cryptocurrency, something I'd never agree to if asked directly. His father had literally coached him on how to protect himself from me being difficult, which meant his father had taught him how to exploit someone who'd worked hard and built something real, had given him the playbook for financial abuse disguised as partnership. And Samuel had already decided I was too busy, too distracted, too focused on work to notice money disappearing from my own accounts. That I was an easy mark because I'd chosen career over constant vigilance. I turned off the shower and wrapped myself in a towel I'd bought with my own money in the bathroom of the condo I'd purchased alone before Samuel Brennan ever existed in my life. The woman looking back at me in the mirror was someone I recognized, not the version who'd been doubting herself for the past week, not the version who'd felt guilty for wanting to protect her assets, but the version who'd worked 80-hour weeks and sacrificed everything to build something that mattered. That woman knew exactly what to do. If Samuel wanted to play strategic games with my life's work, I'd play too. But this game would have rules he didn't know existed. This game would end with only one winner, and it sure as hell wasn't going to be him. I got dressed, dried my hair carefully, and started making phone calls. First to Jonathan Hastings, leaving a detailed voicemail about needing to discuss something urgent. Then to my building manager about lock changes. Then to Rachel. Just 3 words. You were right. By the time I walked back out of my bedroom, composed and perfectly calm, I'd already started building my counterattack. Samuel looked up from the couch, beer in hand, completely oblivious. "Feeling better?" "Much better," I said, and I meant it. Samuel and Marcus left around midnight, both of them loud and drunk and completely oblivious to the fact that I'd heard every single word of their conversation. After they stumbled out, I stood in my living room looking at the beer bottles they'd left behind, the rings on my coffee table, the mess they'd made of my carefully maintained space. Then I cleaned it all up, methodically, completely, wiped down every surface, threw away every bottle, restored my home to exactly how it had been before they'd invaded it. It felt symbolic somehow, taking back my space, erasing evidence of their presence. Thursday morning, I was at my desk by 7. I had Jonathan Hastings on the phone by 8. "I overheard something last night," I said without preamble. "Samuel and his friend Marcus. They were in my living room planning his bachelor party, and I heard the entire conversation from the kitchen. I told him everything, word for word, as close as I could remember. The Vegas expenses Samuel expected me to cover, the asset transfer being his father's idea, a strategy developed from his dad's divorce experience, the cryptocurrency scheme, $50,000 Samuel planned to steal from my savings the moment he had access. The silence on Jonathan's end lasted so long, I checked my phone to make sure the call hadn't dropped. "Jonathan?" "I'm here." His voice had changed completely, taken on an edge I'd never heard before. "Lily, you need to protect everything. Today. Not tomorrow, not next week. Today." "What do I need to do?" "Change every password on every account. Bank accounts, investment accounts, credit cards, everything. Change every security question. If he has visibility into any accounts, even just knowing the login information, remove his access immediately. Then change your locks, all of them. Entrance, deadbolts, garage access, every single lock in that condo." My pen was moving across paper, taking notes the way I'd been trained in law school. "What about documentation?" "Write down everything you remember from that conversation while it's still fresh. Exact quotes if possible, close paraphrases if not. Note the time, the location, who was present. Create a spreadsheet of what you owned before Samuel versus what you purchased together. I'm guessing that's going to be heavily weighted toward your assets. Take photographs of every room showing your property. Back everything up to encrypted cloud storage and send copies to me and to someone you trust completely. Rachel." "Perfect. Do all of this today. If this escalates to legal action, and I think it very well might based on what you've told me, you'll need proof this was calculated fraud, not just a relationship dispute." I was already opening my laptop, pulling up my banking website. "The locks are going to be expensive." "I don't care if they cost $5,000. Change them today. He has keys to your condo, and he's planning to drain your savings. You cannot let him have physical access to your space while you're protecting your accounts." By 9 o'clock, I'd changed every password on every financial account I had. By 10, I'd updated all security questions to answers Samuel would never guess, replacing my mother's maiden name with obscure references only I would know, changing my first pet's name to a randomly generated phrase, creating layers of security that would take a determined hacker to break through. At 11, I called my building's property manager, a woman named Patricia who'd always been efficient and professional. "Patricia, I need to change all the locks in my unit today if possible, tomorrow at the latest." A pause. "Is everything okay, Lily?" "I'm ending my engagement. My fiancé has keys, and I need them to stop working immediately." Her voice shifted, became warmer, more understanding. "I understand completely. Let me call our locksmith. With the smart lock system you have, it's going to run about $1,200 for everything. Entrance, deadbolt, garage access codes." "That's fine. Can they do it tomorrow?" "I'll make it a priority. Will you be home?" "No, but I'll give you authorization to let them in. Just please make sure it happens before end of day Friday." "Consider it done. And Lily, I'm sorry you're going through this." After I hung up, I opened a new spreadsheet and started documenting everything with the precision I brought to complex legal cases. One column for items I'd owned before Samuel moved in. Another for items we'd purchased together. The condo, 100% mine, purchased 6 years ago, mortgage paid off 2 years ago. The Range Rover, 100% mine, purchased 3 years ago with cash. Furniture, approximately 95% mine, accumulated over 6 years. Joint purchases, $400. A set of cookware I never used, around $300. Decorative pillows for the couch, maybe $200. A smart TV he'd insisted we needed, $600. Butterflies, $1,500 out of an estimated $250,000 in assets within the condo. I created another spreadsheet tracking Samuel's financial contributions since he moved in. $1,500 monthly for 10 months. $15,000 total. Utilities, groceries, nothing toward the mortgage that no longer existed, nothing toward property taxes or HOA fees, nothing toward the actual ownership of anything. Then I went room by room with my phone, photographing everything, every angle of every room, the furniture, the art, the appliances, the flooring, the fixtures, creating a visual record of what existed in my space before I removed Samuel from it. I encrypted everything and uploaded it to a secure cloud service. Then I sent copies to Jonathan and Rachel with a simple subject line, documentation. Rachel called immediately. What am I looking at? Evidence, in case Samuel tries to claim he contributed to any of my assets or has rights to anything in the condo. You're really doing this. I'm really doing this. Good. Her voice was fierce, protective. He deserves everything that's coming to him. Friday afternoon, while Samuel was supposedly at work, coffee meetings that never resulted in actual employment, I made a call that felt both petty and absolutely justified. I called Douglas, the owner of the men's boutique in Larimer Square, where Samuel's custom wedding suit was being held. We'd had several conversations over the past few months as Samuel went through multiple fittings, changing details, obsessing over the burgundy lining, the monogrammed cufflinks, the way the charcoal fabric draped. I'd paid for all of it, $5,000 for a suit he'd wear once. Douglas, this is Lily Morgan. We need to talk about Samuel Brennan's wedding suit. Of course, his final fitting is scheduled for Monday afternoon. Is there a problem? The wedding's off. We broke up. I'd like to donate the suit. Silence on the other end. Then, I'm sorry to hear that. Donate it where? You partner with a veterans charity, correct? Veterans Career Closet? Yes, we do. But this is a $5,000 custom Tom Ford suit that you paid for. Every cent of it. Samuel's been living rent-free in my condo for 10 months, while I've covered all wedding expenses. I want that suit donated to a veteran who actually needs it, someone who will wear it with honor to job interviews instead of using it as a costume for a fraudulent wedding. Douglas was quiet for a long moment. If you paid for it, then legally it's yours to donate. But are you certain? This is quite an expensive gesture. I'm completely certain. He has a final fitting scheduled for Monday afternoon. I want the suit gone before he arrives. Can someone from the charity pick it up tomorrow? I can arrange that. But Lily, he's going to be very upset when he shows up and discovers the suit is gone. That's the point. And Douglas, when he does show up, just tell him there was a miscommunication and his suit was donated. Don't mention my involvement unless he asks directly. This feels like there's quite a story here. There is, and it ends with a deserving veteran getting a beautiful suit instead of a con artist wearing it to a wedding that was always about accessing my assets. Saturday morning, I woke up with absolute clarity about what needed to happen next. I drove to the Botanic Gardens where we'd booked our ceremony space. Jennifer, our coordinator, looked concerned the moment I walked in alone. "Lily, is Samuel meeting you here?" "No, I need to cancel the wedding." Her expression shifted to professional sympathy mixed with genuine concern. "I'm so sorry. Let me pull up your contract." She typed on her computer for a moment, face carefully neutral. "The deposit is non-refundable, and canceling within 90 days means we retain 60% of the remaining balance. Total would be about $14,000. I pulled out my checkbook without hesitation. I'd like to pay that now. For the next 2 hours, I systematically canceled every wedding vendor. The photographer, $2,000 lost. The caterer, $3,500 gone. The florist, $1,800. The string quartet, $1,200. Each cancellation felt like cutting a cord that had been slowly strangling me. By noon, I'd spent $23,000 canceling a wedding to a man who'd planned to steal $50,000 from my savings. Still cheaper than what he'd intended. As I was finishing paperwork with Jennifer, she mentioned something that stopped me cold. By the way, a young couple inquired about your October date last week. Both elementary school teachers. They absolutely loved the garden space, but when I quoted them the price, they said it was beyond their budget. The bride actually cried. It was heartbreaking. Something shifted in my chest, something warm and unexpected. What would make it affordable for them? Jennifer calculated quickly. If someone covered about $8,000 of the venue cost, they could probably manage the rest with their savings. My hand was shaking slightly as I wrote another check. Apply this to their booking. Anonymous donor. Tell them someone wanted them to have a beautiful wedding day. Jennifer's eyes filled with genuine tears. You're going for complete strangers to get married. I'm paying for good people to have something beautiful. Samuel was going to use my money to fund cryptocurrency gambling. This feels infinitely better. Sunday morning, I packed all of Samuel's belongings with methodical precision. Every piece of clothing still hanging in my closet, every expensive electronic device scattered throughout my space. His cryptocurrency magazines that now felt like evidence of his true intentions. His motivational business books about manifesting wealth and attracting abundance. Every physical trace of him. I labeled each box clearly and stacked them in my assigned parking space in the garage. Then I sat down at my kitchen table and drafted a text message. I wrote it 17 different times before I got the words exactly right. Samuel, I've thought carefully about your proposal regarding asset transfer. You're right. We need to be on the same page about this marriage. I've realized we have fundamentally different definitions of partnership. You see assets to acquire and exploit. I see a life's work to protect. I've canceled the wedding and all vendors. Your belongings are boxed in parking space 23. I've changed all locks and access codes. Collect your things by Monday noon, after which everything will be donated. I wish you clarity about what partnership actually means. I read it one final time. Then I hit send, powered off my phone completely, and called Rachel. Pack a bag. We're going to Breckenridge for the weekend. Right now? Right now. We stayed in a small cabin in the mountains, hiked trails where the aspen trees were just starting to turn gold, drank wine by a fireplace, talked about everything except Samuel. Rachel kept watching me with concern mixed with something like admiration. You're weirdly calm about this. I'm not calm, I said, looking out at the mountains. I'm free. There's a difference. Sunday evening, Rachel and I drove back from Breckenridge as the sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The entire weekend, my phone had been off, powered down completely. For 48 hours, I'd existed in a space where Samuel Brennan and his schemes didn't exist, where I could breathe without wondering what he was plotting. Now, sitting in Rachel's car as we pulled into Denver, I held the phone in my hand, finger hovering over the power button. You don't have to turn it on yet, Rachel said quietly, glancing over at me. Do. I need to see how bad it is. I pressed the button and watched the screen light up. It took a full 30 seconds for all the notifications to load. 87 missed calls, 62 text messages, 15 voicemails. Jesus, Rachel breathed, glancing at my screen. He completely lost it. I started reading through the texts, watching Samuel's mental state deteriorate in real time through his messages. They'd started arriving within an hour of my text on Sunday morning. Positioned. First came confusion. What are you talking about? Is this a joke? Call me immediately. Then more urgent confusion. Lily, I just tried my key and it doesn't work. What's going on? Call me now. Then panic bleeding through. I went to the garage and all my stuff is in boxes. Please tell me this is some kind of test. Please call me. We need to talk. Then anger started seeping in. You can't just cancel our wedding without discussing it. We paid deposits together. This is insane. We hadn't paid deposits together. I'd paid every single one. The messages continued, timestamps showing he'd been texting every 20 to 30 minutes for hours. Minimized. Everyone's asking me what happened. What am I supposed to tell them? That you went crazy? You're making the biggest mistake of your life. We're supposed to be partners. I can't believe you're doing this over text, after everything we've been through. Then the rage fully emerged, raw and ugly. You know what? Everyone's going to know what kind of person you really are. Controlling, incapable of trust. You're going to die alone in that condo you care about more than actual human beings. Up everything for you. Moved into your place, dealt with your insane work hours, put up with your controlling behavior. And this is how you repay me? Rachel was reading over my shoulder. Put up with your controlling behavior? Is he serious? Keep reading. It gets worse. The bargaining phase started around midnight Sunday. Lily, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said those things. Please, let's just talk face to face. We can work through this. Forget the asset thing. Let's just talk about a prenup instead. Would that make you feel better? I'll sign whatever you want. Please don't throw away what we have over money. I love you, not your condo or your car. Please, just call me. Then came a voicemail from his father that Rachel insisted on listening to after I described it. I put it on speaker. Richard Brennan's voice was cold, controlled rage barely contained. Ms. Morgan, this is Richard Brennan, Samuel's father. What you're doing is not only cruel, it's financial abuse. You manipulated my son, made him financially dependent on you, and now you're publicly abandoning him to humiliate him. You will fix this situation immediately, or you will face serious consequences. Legal consequences. I promise you that. Rachel's mouth fell open. His father literally coached him to steal your assets, and now you're the financial abuser? Projection is a hell of a thing. There were texts from Marcus, too. You're a cold bitch for doing this over text. Samuel deserves better than a corporate shark with no heart. Numbers I didn't recognize, Samuel's friends probably. I don't know what Samuel did, but you didn't have to humiliate him like this. Canceling a wedding 3 months out? That's brutal. I hope you're happy with yourself. I scrolled through them all, feeling nothing. No guilt, no second thoughts, no desire to respond or explain. Just a distant curiosity about how someone could be so completely delusional about their own behavior. Are you going to respond? Rachel asked. No, there's nothing to say. He knows what he did. His father knows what they planned. Responding would just give him an opening to manipulate me again. Monday morning, I did something I'd been planning since Friday, something that felt petty and perfect and absolutely necessary for my own sense of closure. I called in sick to work, the first sick day I'd taken in over a year. Then I drove to Larimer Square, parked across the street from Douglas's boutique, and waited. Lyons, large coffee in hand, sunglasses on despite the overcast Denver weather, car positioned with a perfect view of the entrance. Samuel's final fitting was scheduled for 2 o'clock. I watched people walk past the boutique, watched Douglas help other customers, watched the normal rhythm of a Monday afternoon in downtown Denver. At exactly 2 o'clock, Samuel's Honda Civic pulled up to a parking meter in front of the shop. I sat up straighter, coffee halfway to my lips. He got out of the car with that confident stride I used to find attractive, shoulders back, chin up, like he was about to do something important. He was probably planning to use this fitting as a sympathy story later. My crazy ex canceled our wedding, but at least I'll look good in this suit eventually when I find someone better. He walked into the boutique and I checked my watch. 2:03. Xiaomi at 2:06, the door burst open and Samuel came storming out, phone already at his ear, face dark red with rage. Even from across the street with my windows up, I could hear him screaming, "What do you mean donated?" He was pacing the sidewalk, gestures wild, completely unraveling in public. People walking past were staring, some of them stopping to watch the show. I don't care who technically paid for it. That's my suit, my wedding suit. I took a sip of my coffee, watching the show with something like satisfaction warming my chest. Then something happened that I hadn't anticipated, something that made the entire situation absolutely perfect. A man walked out of the boutique behind Samuel. Late 40s, military posture, close-cropped hair going gray at the temples. And he was wearing the suit. Samuel's suit. The charcoal Tom Ford with the burgundy lining. The man stopped in front of Douglas's shop window, looking at his reflection with an expression I recognized. The kind of wonder that comes from seeing yourself as someone you'd forgotten you could be. He touched the lapels of the jacket gently, like he was afraid it might disappear. Turned slightly to see the fit from different angles. Stood taller, shoulders back, chin up. The suit transformed him, gave him dignity and confidence that radiated outward. Douglas came out of the shop, walked over to the man, shook his hand warmly, said something I couldn't hear that made the man smile. A real smile, genuine and grateful. That's when Samuel turned around and saw him. I watched his face go through the most remarkable transformation. Confusion first. Why is someone wearing a suit that looks exactly like mine? Then recognition. That is my suit. Then pure, incandescent rage. "That's my suit!" he screamed across the sidewalk. Several people stopped walking. A couple pulled out their phones, probably thinking they were about to witness a fight. Douglas stepped between Samuel and the veteran immediately, one hand up in a calming gesture. I couldn't hear everything, but I caught fragments. Douglas's voice was calm, professional, completely in control. This suit was donated by the person who purchased it. Samuel's voice getting louder, more desperate. "I don't care about his interview. That's my wedding suit. Mine." I caught Douglas saying, "Mr. Patterson," looked uncomfortable, started to say something. Douglas cut him off firmly. "You absolutely will not give it back. The suit is yours, earned and deserved." My phone started ringing. I looked screen, looked back up and watched him across the street, phone pressed to his ear, staring at the boutique entrance like I might materialize if he willed it hard enough. I declined the call. Watched him look at his phone in disbelief, then dial again. Declined it again. He tried a third time, then a fourth. Each time I watched his movements become more agitated, more frantic, more desperate. Finally, he screamed, at no one in particular, "You can't do this! That suit cost $5,000! Douglas raised one eyebrow. I could see it clearly from across the street. That perfect expression of devastating calm. "You're welcome to pursue legal action. However, Ms. Morgan provided extensive documentation proving she paid for the entire ensemble. You'll be suing the person who purchased it for donating their own property. I encourage you to consult an attorney about the likely outcome." The small crowd that had gathered was watching with open interest now. Someone was definitely filming. Samuel stood there, face red, fists clenched at his sides, looking between Douglas, Mr. Patterson in his suit, and the people staring at him with undisguised interest. Then he turned and stormed back to his Honda Civic, the 15-year-old car he'd been driving when we met, that had sat mostly unused in my garage for 10 months while he drove my Range Rover everywhere. He got in, slammed the door, and peeled out of the parking spot so aggressively his tires squealed against the pavement. I watched him disappear down the street, then looked back at the boutique. Mr. Patterson was going back inside with Douglas, both of them talking, the veteran still touching the jacket like he couldn't quite believe it was real. I finished my coffee, started my car, and drove home to my condo. The best part wasn't Samuel's public humiliation, though I'd be lying if I said that didn't feel deeply satisfying. The best part was knowing that right now, a good man was wearing that $5,000 suit, a man who would wear it with honor to job interviews, who would use it to rebuild his life, who deserved it infinitely more than Samuel Brennan ever had. Sometimes revenge isn't about destruction. Sometimes it's about making sure something beautiful ends up in the right hands. And watching Samuel unravel on that sidewalk while a deserving veteran walked away with dignity, that was closure I hadn't known I needed. But Samuel wasn't done. Not even close. The real battle was just beginning.